All you, Anna.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks, you guys, for joining. I see we got 16 participants already, so that suggests that you have an interest. No more than 60 seconds about myself. I'm twice retired and a busy retiree. I retired from the federal government. Half my career I did at the White House Budget Office, retired from SES for 2 weeks. And then I got a job with a major IT company, and I had a global job there, responsibility for about 7 years. But throughout that time, most of that time, I can't remember what president it was, but I felt really burnt out at work. I know it was when I was working in the executive office of the president, and I started taking art classes over at the torpedo factory, and the instructor kept saying, can't you see the green in that yellow? And can't you see the red in that brown? So I started going to the art galleries, looking at exhibitions. And one of the docents says, why don't you sign up? And I said, well, look, I don't have a background in art. My degree is in accounting and finance, etc. So I did sign up, and they did let me in. So I've been a docent at the National Gallery almost 23 years. And I give tours in all the different disciplines that we offer. I kind of like what I do too. So glad that you guys are joining us today via Zoom, but come on down in person. I'll be doing a tour Sunday morning, and I'll do one for you guys anytime you want in person. A little bit about the way I have structured the tour today. I fully understand that folks really want an emphasis on Rodin, but I'm going to try to walk you through a little bit how we got there and where we are in terms of moving towards Rodin, and hopefully we won't go too far over, and we will do due diligence in terms of that. But my thinking is to kind of start at the beginning and move forward. I'm not going back to Greece, okay? Not that far back. Okay, let's see if I can share screen. Well, we did a practice. There we go. It worked. We have nights at the gallery, and it's really fun, especially since you guys are in DC. And actually, next Thursday night is one. Evenings at the gallery, we have live entertainment. People can come out like you see here on the roof, and that's something a lot of folks don't appreciate. And even if you were to drive, you can park on the street around 6 or 6:30, so you can come to these events. And this is obviously up on the terrace with the blue rooster. That's what most people tend to think of when you look at this architecture. You think of this as a typical style of most museums. The National Gallery of Art was founded by Andrew Mellon, and we opened the doors in 1937. And that's after Andrew Mellon had been a banker in Pittsburgh most of his time, Secretary of the Treasury, and then also he went over to the UK. He wasn't officially an ambassador. People referred to him, but it wasn't actually that. But we think that's where he got the idea of a National Gallery of Art, because the National Gallery of Art in London opened about 100 years before our National Gallery of Art. As you also know that the National Gallery of Art is not part of the Smithsonian. I can't count the times I have to make that clarification. Andrew Mellon used his own funds, and he selected all of the basic collection, the initial collection, when we opened the doors. Unfortunately, he died a few months right before we opened the doors, but he had the collection. He used to travel to Europe in the summer, and he would buy and buy. And his EA, his executive assistant in his personal life, as well as professionally, was Finley. And Finley survived Andrew Mellon, and he became the first director of the National Gallery of Art. What are you looking at? You're looking at a building that has a European Deco style, but you also are looking at a building mostly, over about 90%, made from a quarry in Tennessee of lavender pink marble. That's the essence of what you see in this building. The building gives you the suggestion that you're going to see traditional representational type of art. Just even on the approach. When you get inside, up on the mezzanine level, what we call the main floor, in the West Building, we have Mercury there. And today's discussion is about sculpture, and that's sculpture, obviously. And sculpture that you'll see primarily in this building when construction's not going on. You would see sculpture the way we had been conditioned for about 400 or 500 years, up until like the 20th century and the 19th century. That is typically, it's a man on a horse, it's somebody up high that you're looking at. That's typically what you see with sculpture. Also, looking at sculpture compared to looking at a painting on the wall, the sculpture by and large is looking at the way the light hit the subject. It has to consider the medium. If you look at this sculpture of Mercury, and if it were done in wood, it would not nearly be as attractive as it is. The light would not reflect as well. There's some other things about sculpture that I will talk about, but I just want to let you know this is always our centerpiece. And during the holidays, after Thanksgiving, it's really pretty. We tend to decorate it. So moving from that building, what is this? Does it look like your grandkids' drawing? This is Unbate, where he was doing the sketching to connect the West Building to our East Building. And what you see on the right-hand side here is our East Building, the sketching. It's two isosceles triangles. People don't realize it's just two isosceles triangles. In our East Building, there is not one 90-degree angle. That is, I repeat, there is zero, not a single 90-degree angle anywhere in the building above ground. That gives you a sense of contemporary. So most of our contemporary, some of our later 20th century sculpture, and we got a few cases in the 21st century, you'll find in this building. And you get a sense of that even on the approach. Unbate did the connectivity between our East Building and the West Building, which is on my left on the screen here. And that circle is the area where you see the water fountain frequently. And if you look at the glass pop-ups, I was talking to someone a few minutes ago who just got back from Paris. And if you go to the Pompidou Center, which was also done by Unbate, you see that same type of connectivity. Here's another view of the East Building. It gives you a sense that you're going to approach that modern contemporary art just on the approach. The glass pop-ups here are what I was referring to that you'll see looks just like the Pompidou Center. So what Unbate did, he went back to the same quarry in Tennessee and had that quarry tapped. That stones is slightly different, but it's materially different in shape, those two isosceles triangles. And even on the outside, people can't keep their fingers off or hands off. Even on the outside, it's not a 90-degree angle for it. And then that's our so-called East Building. This is a very popular, I'm sure all of you have seen our East Building on the inside. And again, the motif for this East Building is a triangular motif. And again, not one single, even going up the elevators, going up the steps, not a single 90-degree angle. If you look at the tiles, I'm not going to go too far down, but if you just look down at the tiles, they're in triangles. If you look at the ceiling, those are triangles as well. And right in front of us, we see the Alexander Calder. Now, when Unbate did this building, he had the intent that whenever you're outside walking, you should always see color on that wall. So you see colors of orange, green, blue, yellow, orange, and blue on the wall. Before, we used to have a large tapestry, but it could not take the wear and tear anymore, so we don't put that up. It was by Juan Nero. So this building is supposedly outside, bringing you in, no matter whether you're inside a building or walking around the building. It's just an aerial view here of our sculpture garden, which we're proud of. So this is our first stop for today, for today's session. Now, with this is an Etruscan head from somewhere around the 2nd century BC. People, because it has broad nose and fairly thick lips, folks attributed to being an African head. For the mastery of understanding proportions and to get this correct, you just can't overstate it. For example, art schools and things like that had not come into being yet. We didn't have art as an occupation to just be an artist until around the time of the High Renaissance for it. But this is a very well done. This was a vessel. And you can use it to pour water. You can tell the age by the patina and the green around the eyes and the ears. But I just want to let you know that accuracy, proportionality, depth of field, all that was mastered, quite a while before BC. That's a while back. This is one of my favorite pieces I like. This is a chalice. The chalice used a lot in terms of religious ceremonies, depending on many Roman Catholic, whatever. That's how I grew up. This was done in two parts. For example, it'll tell you that the cup was done around 1137, 1140. And that's out of a stone, and it has veins in it, the cup. And then later on in the 12th centuries, when it was mounted and turned to gold with the jewels for it. And we keep it in a glass case, and it is on view. Everything that I have in today's presentation is on view. I made sure of that before I finished up the slides a few minutes ago. For it. I won't spend a lot of time about the detail on this chalice, but I want you to know that representational, going ornamentation, etc., started, over 1,000 years ago. And this piece is beautiful, and even on the inside. And what, our takeaway is that we felt like the monk saw a stone that was so beautiful and then carved the stone into a cup and to use it. And then hundreds of years later, someone came back and did the filigree with the gold and turned it into a chalice. Now moving forward a little bit, what are we now in the Renaissance period, into 15th century, and Pisanello is the person. When you look at Renaissance metals, he was just the man in terms of producing. He was the pioneer in terms of producing coins, in terms of a Renaissance portrait metal. He was the first one. It made him immensely popular in producing these metals. And you can see his skill set. And I'll talk a little bit more about relief when I get what I feel would be a better example. But the mastery of what's done in this metal here, you can see the hole there because it was given as a wedding gift. It's printed on, it's relief on both sides. On the other side of this, I think it's the one that has the lion's head on it. But you see the workings of the leaf and the name, etc. But he didn't have to come up with real high relief. And the detail is mastered, especially looking at the bottom for that. So Pisanello blossomed early in his career, and he went real high and stayed there for a very long time. I want to also take a point that to go off on a tangent a little bit here. Metals in Western civilization got to be a little wacky between, say, 1100s and the 1400s. For one reason, some people were trying to use metals for their value, the economic value, like if you got an ounce of gold or silver, and then you could get something made out of nickel or copper, so we had not established a monetary system in the major countries, let alone internationally. So this area, this time frame, it was blurred. But for this was just a bronze one, metal, and Pisanello was it, and there were a lot of wannabes that came after him. Pisanello worked primarily up in the Venice area. That's where he spent most of his life for. So that's an aspect about metals. For a lot of us, metals used to be important. They would be part of gifts at retirement ceremonies, major anniversary dates, but our country's gotten away from that. Even when I first started work, I remember I'd get a 5-year medal or 10-year medal. It doesn't happen anymore. So here we're moving along, and at this point we have the Madonna and Child. And I want to step aside and talk a little about Christianity for it. So there was a papal decree in 787 by the Pope, and said that art should only exist for devotional purposes. That is social, like landscape, humor. No. And that papal decree governed from about 787 to around 1200s. And that's when artists start peeling away. That is doing more of what we call genre, everyday scenes. And also, too, if you imagine what we're looking at here, the Madonna and Child, if it were made out of marble, you can guess the cost of it. If this was made as a bronze, you can guess the cost. It would be prohibitive. It'd be very costly. This is done by Andrea della Robbia. His uncle was a pioneer in this. What am I talking about? What they do, they take terracotta, and then they would bake it, and then they would paint it. And once they started taking this approach, that made these type of images available for procurement. People could put these devotional images in their homes. It goes in churches or outdoor shrines, very accessible. And so folks kept saying, well, I got to have a Della Robbia. They didn't even care about the first name, Della Robbia, Della Robbia. And so early on, a lot of people attribute the assembly line to the Della Robbias because they became so popular. I'm not that good at it, but I know some of the curators can look and tell. They would just bake the angels and just pluck them in, near the end because they were so popular. They could not sit there and paint each one. It was almost like an assembly line. But if you take a look at this one, it's very well done, especially look at the baby Jesus here looking out at us with the eyes and all. It's very masterful in terms of how Andrea della Robbia has pulled this together. Drifting back on another point that I totally didn't finish is that after the papal decree in around 1400s, then artists start moving away from Christianity and nature. And that's why whenever you go, wherever you go, to the Fine Art Museum in this country and any other major country, well, I mean, Japan, they don't do representational art like this in places in the Middle East, but you'll find in this time frame, almost always Christianity. It's going to be the Madonna and Child, and maybe Jesus Christ on the cross. I don't know, John the Baptist, somebody. It's going to be Christianity and nature. So this is after that papal decree had subsided, which was around 1200. Why? Because it was safe. People were so conditioned on getting something religious in nature. So the artist, the whole concept as art as an occupation had not come into being. And if you want your money back and if you want to sell your work, you're going to do something that's safe. Madonna and Child, Jesus, the disciples, the Last Supper, all those things were safe. So and when art became an occupation, people started branching out. But up until that time, this was safe. So the Della Robbias made art accessible to the common person. This is not my best example, but I'm going to use it. I also told you about relief. This is what you call a relief. That is, it comes three-dimensional, comes out at us, but it's not quite high relief. When we wrap up today, when we wrap up with the Thinker and Dante's Hell and with Rodin, you're going to see some really, really high relief. It's so high, you think it's going to pop off, its foundation for it. But this is a relief that the Della Robbias used, and they were popular for a very long period of time. Here's another. This one is by Verrocchio, and I have two by him. This is my being selfish. I think that terracotta, without getting painted, is just as beautiful or more beautiful in my view. I'm a naturalist. Just looking at this is this plain terracotta that's baked. I think it's gorgeous. You can see everything. Now let's go back. You see, that was terracotta too, but they painted over that. And it is lovely, no question about it. Great attention to detail. But to me, it's almost like comparing a color painting picture to a black and white. And some people feel that a black and white or a sepia tone forces you to look at the details more. But this Verrocchio is just gorgeous. And Andrea, and this is one of the Medicis. This is a younger one of Cosimo Medici that was murdered in the church when they tried to topple the Medici family for it. And this is also by Verrocchio. And this little piece kind of brings me up to, again, setting the stage as to where we're going and what we're going to talk about a little bit more as we progress here. Now you see Pluto placed on a globe. And you know, so what? What do you want me to look at? I want you to look at a whole lot. This is rare, not just unusual. It's rare for you to see a sculpture. You can go anywhere you want, anywhere in the world. To see a sculpture that has that much weight above with such little, the weight of that sculpture is just on that 1 foot. Now, when we get further into our presentations, I'm gonna come back to this point. In addition, this is unbaked clay. So it's a mystery as to how it even survived all these years, because it was never baked to really harden. But it shows, again, how well Verrocchio was able to produce this sculpture, as well as the one that we just looked at here with Verrocchio. Now, to me, this is not quite as good, but it's really good as what we're going to see with Rodin near the end in terms of the age of man. Yet people criticize him as saying that he was a person that he covered up with plaster that he didn't really shape. But some folk, there's not as much detail in here, but you can see folk are moving in that direction. But again, look at the way Verrocchio has captured the curls and the little Pluto's hair, etc. And I should tell you what you're looking at. No one knows where this really came from, you know, where position. But during the Renaissance period, at this time around at the near the end of the 15th century, you would have, like the Medicis and all, they would have gardens. And you can see that if you go down to New Orleans. Sometimes if you go up in the northern part of Italy, you'll find a lot of places that still have a community garden inside, like on the round. And we feel that there was a water fountain, and the water went through this little babe's hand, through the mouth and go back. It was just a recycling water fountain for it. But some people debate that, but that's what we're told. We're still hanging in here on sculpture. Now we jumped a couple hundred years, and what do we see here? Of course, we see marble, duh. But this is where I wanted to point something out to you. Where I told you with Pluto, you'd see him standing here with 1 foot, barely on the toes, and then you come here and you see Nydia, and we'll talk about her. This is typically what you see. See that broom and see that basket? She needs that. Not only she needs it, Rogers, the artist, the sculptors, he needs that, because all of that weight for that sculpture, that's pretty good size. That's at least a human size. We have it up on the pedestal and all, but she's a big, 54 inches right there. So that weight could not be sustained on a little toe, etc. So when you see these big sculptures like that, always, well, I know to look for it, but I always find it amusing as to how the artist addressed it. See that basket? They need that basket to sustain that statue. And wherever you go, whatever you look at, when you see a big mass marble statue, and it's going to be on 1 foot and 1 toe, they need that weight. No matter how creative the artist is, they need that weight to sustain it, for it to have stability. Now, this painting was such a success for Rogers that he just came out the gates. That's quite unlike Rodin. You know that. Rodin did not, I don't like to say pay dirt, but he didn't really make it big until, I don't know, until he was 40-some years old. But Rogers came out early, very well, and with this painting. This is Nydia, just in case you don't know. It's based on, Pompeii. The story goes, it's a fable that when Mount Vesuvius erupted, she was in love with somebody who loved somebody else, okay? And, but she knew that the person she loved and the person that he loved would never find their way to safety because of all of the smoke from the volcano and the ashes was just blinding everyone. So, Jonas, we can take a little breather here and somebody can tell me how this statue is telling the story I just told you guys. You got to talk fast, people, because they have me on the clock. I'm not going to give you time to overthink. Tell me what you see here that bespeaks what I just told you, what she did. Well, nobody's talking to me. She's blind. She went and found the person she loved and got his girlfriend. She was leading them to safety. How is she doing it? Because she has her hand cupped over her ear. She's listening to the sounds of the Mediterranean Sea, because that's right there off the Mediterranean. She's listening to the sign of the sea. So she knows she can guide them away from the ashes from Mount Vesuvius. And Rogers, the sculptor, the artist, is talking to us. He's showing us the hand. He's also showing us by the way the wind is blowing. So she can feel the wind on her body, supposedly blowing her clothing. You can see which way. And she's confirming that with her hand as she guides them to safety. The way the story goes in mythology is that after she got them to safety, then she just walked out and committed suicide. So we don't know whether it's true or not, but that's the story. Okay, we got something quite different here. This is a little unusual slash rare. I am very happy. You know, I like the Corcoran a whole lot. And I know this is not to be about me, it's about us talking about these sculptures. But when I did half my life at the White House budget office, I would run down to the Corcoran a lot of times at lunchtime just for a break. And so when they closed the Corcoran, it was a little sad because that had been my home, my little place to get a release sometimes. And I always loved, this. This was in the Corcoran forever. And this painting, you would not believe, it was purchased by Mr. Corcoran himself on a trip. I don't know. I guess he was I'm not sure where he was. I don't know. It was in New York. And he got it for $300 back in the day for it. And this captures the essence of what she looked like, as well as putting the veil over. Now, the experts who are smarter than I ever will be, they can put pieces together. And this was not a servant. This was not the place person who cleaned house. There's a high-end hairstyle underneath here. And the way she has the hair curled with frills right near the forehead also suggests that she wasn't the house servant for it. And then to take all this as marble and make it feel so sheer, it almost gives you goosebumps when you look at it. Just overlook this down in the corner on the bottom. But when the next time you're in there, I would suggest taking a look at that. So many of us were so happy that we got this because we didn't get everything at the Corcoran collection, but we did get this one. And it was a steal. Don't ask me the artist because we don't know. They had speculated, they found somebody I could think about 30, 40 years ago, and then now that's been disputed. So the takeaway is we still don't know who the artist, but it was a steal. Mr. Corcoran obviously had a good eye, and he bought that back, I think like 1840. When did he buy that? 1863. Yeah, he bought it shortly after it was done for it. I love it. I think it's fabulous. Now we get into, I guess, the highlight of the day. It's only fair I won't close the screen down because it's too much closing it down, but we're going to talk a little bit before we jump in here. What you see is something I touched on a tad ago, and that is capturing the human body, okay, and capturing the sculpture. Earlier, I mentioned to you that traditionally, up until this time, the latter part of the 19th century, you would see a sculpture with a guy, I don't know, Custer at war, or somebody, Robert E. Lee at war, and he's sitting up on a horse, or somebody sitting up, when you go to a city center, Rome, or whatever, you see people at the top of a building, at the top, whatever, up high. You always look up at these statues, and they were never. So the change of that, one of the forerunners of bringing a change to that was Rodin. Okay, Rodin, was born in 1840. He put some humanization, if there's such a word. You put some humanization in the sculpture. You don't have to go and look at this man up on a horse or whatever. If you're in Boston, you're at the courthouse down there in Boston, not the courthouse, right there in the park, you know, where you got the Augusta St. Garden speech, and all of that is so up high. You know, you go there looking for the statue, and you got to look up for it. And you go to Philadelphia, and you got to look at the top of City Hall to see Billy Penn. I mean, so Rodin brought them down, and because of my constraints of time and all, I didn't bring in the burglars of Calais. But you know, there were 6 men that they decided to save the town. They said, "Take us, kill us, and save the town." And then after that was all over, the town commissioned, the people of Calais, they commissioned Rodin to do the burghers of Calais. And that was one of the groundbreaking approaches too, where, you know, Rodin he humanized, if there's such a word, he humanized sculpture. So with the burglars of Calais, you just walk right next, they're eye level. They may be on a little pedestal like you see here with the Age of Bronze, but that's it. He brought that down. Now, also, when you look at this one in the Age of Bronze, you drop this in Google and you probably get 500 hits on, you know, on the criticism that Rodin got on this. They felt that nobody could sculpt that well. They felt like he took the guy, they didn't be sure if the guy was really real, etc. Years later, like I think 1879, after he first put this out, he displayed it, I think in 1877 the first time, but he was criticized. You know, folks said you can't do it that well, and it hurt him quite a bit. And he tried to refute several years. He tried to refute. He was able to save himself a little bit later with the Kiss, but let's stay with the Age of Bronze. There are several of these Age of Bronze pieces that are out with it. But after Rodin produced this one, he said never, ever again would he produce anything life-size. It would be significantly smaller or significantly larger. Never, ever again would he produce a piece like this. Now, when you come to, again, I feel like I don't want to be pejorative, but I feel like I'm selling the gallery, and I am. So if you come in for us, because there are several, I think there are 6 of these, 6, yeah, there's 6 life-size figures that still exist like this. What we have is, in the bronze, is small. Okay, what do they have here? 41 by 11. That's the smaller, but we also have the cast. We have the actual cast, and we got the first Rodin full size that was ever came to Washington, D.C. It came to the National Gallery of Art. Yeah, first one has one of those Calais in their courtyard and others, but we had the first here, the National Gallery of Art. And with this piece with the Age of Bronze, we also have the plaster. So when you stand at a certain spot in the gallery collection, you can first see the plaster that you use to produce this. You know, they use a founder, okay? So the original is life size, but depending on the amount of money and time, you can calibrate and let the little needle ride over every little square inch of the original, and you can make it larger or you can make it smaller. So we have a smaller bronze of this Age of Bronze, and you can stand, the way the curators have it set up, you can look at the plaster, which is human size, the one that got him all the criticism, and it's scaled down to a smaller bronze right in the next gallery. If you stay in the right spot, you can see both of them at the same time. That's kind of remarkable. Would like for you to look at that. And then you can also see where the armatures, when you build a sculpture, you have armatures to hold it together in order to continue to build the plaster until you get it. You can see all the armature marks and all with our Age of Bronze for this. There's so much literature out there. Now this is the plaster that I was telling you about. You stand here, we got the full size plaster, 70 by 78 and 28, you see here, and then it scales down into this bronze. And they both are on a diagonal when you go into our sculpture collection for it. But this is the one that they felt that nobody could ever sculpt that well, and they criticized him for it. But the Age of Bronze is this. So with this, with the kiss, there's a whole lot of stories on this one too. But before I start talking about it, I want to point out some things that I haven't done so far. One, Rodin, Damier, and Degas. The three of them had an approach where their bases, see the roughness of the base here with this kiss, you got something with the smooth bodies and all this intimacy, and then you got this bulk base. And not only is it bulk, it's rough. Like you can see the fingers were molded, didn't try to polish it. During this time frame, the only three artists who tend to do this was Degas, Damier, and Rodin. They did that. And it's really a contrast when you look at this, especially when you see it in marble, a larger, and see how he molds that bottom. And the other two artists do the same thing for it in capturing it. Now, this is based on a love story. You know the story. The lady was married to an older guy. He comes in and kills the lover, etc. But I want to talk about the tools that they use in terms of producing this. With this, when you sculpt, you use three tools. You use something like a pick. You use something like what they used to call it, spatula, a spatula. When you would flip an egg, they don't do that anymore. And you go in, and then you have one that's like fingers. Those are the only three tools. Now, this is a plaster. It's not the best example. But those are the tools that an artist uses when they work. Like if you look here, that space between the nose and the arm, that has to be chiseled out. Rodin was very impressed with Michelangelo, but he didn't work the same way. Michelangelo would take a block or a piece and just say, hey, I can feel this beautiful body inside, and I release it. And he just start chiseling away and going forward. Rodin did not work that way. Rodin did it more, quote, the traditional way, which people, if you can imagine this base here being a solid piece of, well, let's say marble. I know we're talking about Rodin, but I think this is a better example. I think, yeah. So look under her neck. There's space there between her chin and her elbow. And look from her hand. That just doesn't happen. And I'm going to tell you, when you work with marble, it's no fun. It's no game. It's no joke, as the young kids say, because you have to use what I was telling you, like a pick. They used to call it an ice pick. You can call it an owl, whatever. But you have to go through and knock that out, that space. Depending on the quality of the marble that you're using, sometimes you get a hairline crack in that, just like you do with an automobile. You get a little stone on what do you call it, windshield, and then it goes all the way across. Well, things like that can happen to marble as well. And then they have to start all over again. And artists, if you didn't have a commission, you didn't start getting commissions until the latter part of the 15th century after Cosimo Medici out of Florence. And so the artist would have to be very careful how they get that space in there, and up from her chin down in between the arms. And they would have those three basic tools that I told you. Also, too, this shows you a sharp contrast, and this is more common, and this is typical. This was maybe the rule of thumb or the accepted approach. See that base that Nydia is standing on? It's just a smooth, smooth, smooth. You don't find that on, am I going the wrong way? Yes, I am. I'm glad I'm not getting a speeding ticket. See, the base there is where that's not the best. This is a good example. That is what you find on Rodin's work. You can almost name it because he tends to do that all the time. And so do Damier and Degas for it. So here there's more space. You don't see that delicacy other than maybe up in the armpit in terms of that those approaches with the sculpture for it. Now, another thing that I should mention, take a little pause with Rodin. Rodin was, he worked on his stuff. He had the commission to do the supposedly in a decorative arts museum that wasn't built during his time the way it was supposed to be. And he had the commission to prepare it to work on the doors. And on the doors, At the top of the door, he was going to put the thinker. He had the kiss that I keep jumping back and forth on and make you dizzy. He was going to have that as one of the panels on the door, all the designs. And he worked on that for about 30 years. So the original commission didn't come to fruition, but he didn't give up on the approaches. He kept working. And then when he was in major exhibitions, sometimes he would pluck off. So he plucked off the kiss, the couple we saw. I didn't do the Age of Bronze. He didn't pull that off. But he pulled the thinker off and put them out individually to pieces for certain exhibitions. And then, as you know, near the end, he sold his, he gave his house and had a limitation on the production and a number of casts that could be done on a lot of his works. But I just want to let you know that sculpture takes a lot of technical skill to produce it. And even after having the technical skill, produce it. Now this is in bronze, but I really wish I had the marble version out to show you, because I think you can see the more complexity of the work with that. So it's what most people tend to think of all the time when they think of Rodin. They think of the thinker, and I do too a lot. So with the thinker, for that, I remember one day I had a lecture down at the gallery, and of course I didn't believe him. One of the lecturers said that they talked to specialists and said that almost every muscle in the body is pulled in this sculpture. And we used to, when the kids come in and we would do a children's tour, we would tell some of them to sit down. And if you sit down and take that elbow and put it on the other knee and move like that, it is very tense across your body. Then you have the furrow in the brow. So, and all these lines in his legs, and anyway, he has the toes pulled back, and he doesn't have hammer toes from wearing stilettos. Those, he's showing all that tension, all that comes in. That's the mastery of Rodin. Plus, he was very creative. He just he threw that old rule book out in terms of having people on the horse and having folk that you stand and look at, and the horse has one hoof up or two hoofs up. And he brought the sculpture into the audience for us. So I have about 5 more minutes. So this too shows you what he has the thinker sitting on. That shows again that roughness for where he takes his hands and mold. He doesn't try to make it smooth for it. And you can see, if just looking at this thinker, and if you go back, I'm not going to go back and get busy if I keep clicking the screens, but if you go back to the Age of Bronze, it's easy to understand it's the same artist, because he looks deeply and captures what he sees. If I gave any of you guys a pencil, and some of you may be able to draw and paint quite well, but what we typically do when we see a leg on, we just draw a straight line. We don't look at it carefully. And to capture this was an era where folks had not treated the human body like this since way back in the area where we first started. Again, remember, we first started with the Etruscan Head, where there's a lot of detail, and that was like, what, 3-4th century BC. And then folks walked away from that. You had the Madonna and Child, and you had all these mythology people, Venus and Bacchus and all them standing up high, but you hadn't anyone capturing that human body just for the beauty of the human body, and to make that sculpture down with us, down on the ground with us, eye level with us, the viewer. That did not occur. The ground changer in this one was Rodin, who did this. In case you're curious what happens next, is that you go over to 20th century. Of course, I'm going to say Don started some of the early 20th century. I get that. But you move over to 20th century, and then you go to our other building, the East Building, where I told you we have a modern contemporary art. We've got the rooster on the top. Then you see sculpture that's painted. You look at David Smith and people out of New York, and they'll have a sculpture that's painted orange or blue or whatever. So then the question becomes, Is it a painting or is it a sculpture? Well, it's both, because it's a painting and it's a sculpture. Well, that was another change that came on the heels of Rodin for it. But the mastery of the human body in modern society, you know, hands down, that's Rodin for it. So I think, oh, I just threw these in there. So again, I don't even think these are the best examples I can, but it's just to show you how he puts that in every time. He likes to show that roughness, something to capture for it. And even here, just to show the smoothness and the contrast, he could have made this smooth, but the eye, rough, smooth, and then he starts to elongate and to make it more modern looking versus when you have something here, this is more realistic that you would typically see. And then you see a little subtlety in here. He starts, in some of the bigger pieces, he starts elongating a little bit. The arms and whatever look a little longer because he started moving into modernity in terms of more modern art. And if you come in and catch some of his early 20th century pieces, you'll see that he moves towards that modernity that you don't find. Here's a good one. Now see here, these two go back to this one right here, and it's up. It shows you all the three tools I told you that a sculptor typically uses. Right here, you can see all three of them. Right here, you see those lines that look like a fork? That's what they use. In here is smooth. And that's something that they use, what I would call a spatula. I don't even know if they make spatulas anymore, but my mom used to have a spatula to go underneath an egg and flip it over, but that's the kind of tool they would use here. And then the third would be, folks used to call it an ice pick. Some people call it an owl, whatever. But it's a sharp tool. It's like a stick. And you knock it out, but you got to be careful because if you hit it, you get a vein or a run, you got to start all over again. So you see the skill and mastery of the artist when you can see them going in little areas and carve it the way they want and still keep it in place. I don't want to talk about Michelangelo, but that's how Michelangelo did David. Somebody had started working on a piece of stone like this. They got a run on it and they pushed it aside. He was walking around in Florence, Michelangelo, and he saw where they had pushed the stone because they didn't have the big trash removal companies back then. And he picked it up and he was able to pull David out of somebody else's waist because of the mastery of Michelangelo. Well, I just want to point out the three tools that sculptors typically use. And then once they finish, they give it to a smoother who polishes and make it real smooth. And then if Rodin wanted to make this bigger or smaller, he would give it to a founder, and a founder just traces it. It takes weeks, to go over and just trace it over and can make it larger or smaller. But again, this just shows you it looks simple, but it's pretty complex, and he used all these tools, and his eye is so good with detail, Rodin, that this is just smooth as like a baby's bottom, and then you got the little roughage here, and then it goes smooth again, and roughage. So he's putting texture and depth in this with his hands. So I got 221. So I'm going to stop my share. Well, I guess I could, yeah, stop my share. Okay, Jonas, it's up to you. Where are we?
Hello. Well, we got a few more minutes here. There's a couple questions that came in the chat that I'll ask you first.
Okay.
But if people want to put more questions in the chat or mute yourself and just ask the question directly in a couple seconds, that would work as well. But a couple questions from the chat. Someone asked, how can unbaked clay be preserved for 800 years? How was it treated?
Well, we keep it in the glass. That's a good question. I hate to say it. I hear TV folks say that's a good question. I always think they're trying to buy time. No, that's what makes it so masterful, because that's rare to have unbaked clay to last by itself like that without having it baked. And the way we have it at the gallery, we have it in a glass enclosure. It's like the old-fashioned doll cases where people used to have dolls and put them inside of a glass case. Well, that's where we have that too, so, and we have to keep it that way. It's climate controlled and all. So that's definitely, it must be an engineer to ask the question. But yes, it has to be controlled. But the fact that it was able to stay and not bake, that was groundbreaking in and of itself. And of course, we have to do what we have to do to maintain it. But for it to have even existed before it got in our possession is phenomenal.
Great. Another question, which I think is very interesting because I've seen it in a few different places. How many copies of The Thinker exist?
Wait a minute, did I have that? I don't know off the top of my head. I had somewhere. But I know there's 69 versions of The Kiss, but I don't know. I don't have it at the top of my head. I may have it in my notes. I'll flip through it while we talk. But no, I know there's 69 versions of The Kiss, but don't want to misspeak about The Thinker that are out there.
A number of them, though.
50, oh, that's 56 on our but no, I don't have that number in my notes here.
Okay, good question, though, because I know there's a number of those out
Mhm.
there. Does anyone else have any questions either through the chat or just by unmuting yourself? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask now. Questions? Questions? Well, if there's no more questions, I do want to just thank you, Anna, for taking the time to chat with us today. I know it was, I don't know, I found it fascinating, especially all the images. And I've been to that room a number of times, but I'll go back with a new perspective whenever I can next make it over there. And I think it's I don't know, it's just a fascinating topic and fascinating bit of history. So thank you very much. Does anyone else have any last thoughts or questions before we wrap things up? I see someone's unmuted there. If you're unmuted, feel free just to chat. Or not, that also works fine.
We're not going to torture them. They don't. Okay, I'm going to take it as a positive thing.
Well, thank you one more time then, and thank everyone for coming. And I hope to see you at a future upcoming Foggy Bottom Village tour or event in the next few weeks. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.